Hello, MotoAmerica fans. Welcome to this latest edition of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. We are a couple of weeks away from the Mid-Ohio round, and we have somebody. Well, let me just say, I'm Sean Bice. I'm joined by Paul Carruthers, our communications manager, and also with us is a guy that, man, it's been a long time coming getting him on there, and it's one of those things where he's been in our paddock for a long time as a racer and as a team manager and all kinds of things. And it's like, I talked to him a little bit at, I don't remember what round it was, but I was like, God, Richie, we need to get Richie Alexander on here. So we have our 1998 750 Super Stock, was it called then, Richie?
Supersport.
Supersport, yeah.
Okay, and you were racing Super Stock there then too, I remember.
Yeah.
You were on a Suzuki, and we're gonna. It's some of this is a little fuzzy for me, so I want to start off with this. And Paul's got some pretty good knowledge on this because his dad managed you or was the team crew chief or whatever his role was with Chaparral back then. So let's start by talking about that era. And the one thing I want to start with you, Richie, is we were just discussing this before we got on air, that Mike Baldwin, but back when I lived in New Hampshire and Gerald Rothman and all those guys, I honestly say, did you race in the Loudon Road Racing Series at all? Because I don't remember that.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I got my roots.
Okay.
But I was after those guys.
Okay.
So predominantly 95, 96 was my Loudon, Bridgehampton days.
Okay.
And then I decided to go full-time professional in 97.
Okay.
Yeah.
97's the year I moved away from there. It was yeah, so around that time. But so I wasn't sure if you were right around Gerald Rothman or not, but so pretty quickly after that you got kind of involved with Chaparral. So give us that progression a little bit.
Well, it's funny, I actually bought Gerald's Yoshimura 1995 GSXR to race at Loudon. And then went on in 96 to teammate with Eric Wood. And we pretty much, I think we won 9 or 10 championships that year.
Wow.
But in doing that, I tried a couple of nationals. And I remember it was like my second national, and I qualified second in the 750 class between Pascal and Aaron Yates. And it was an eye-opener. But I did well. I finished top 5, and I got Bill Siphon's eye with Suzuki. And for 1997, they decided to have me pretty much be the only Suzuki sport rider that year. Originally, they used to run 5 or 7 riders in the sport program, but because Hypercycle was starting up with Jason Pridmore, I think Mark Miller, they only wanted one support rider, which was, great for me because they gave me a humongous bonus and parts and bikes. So it was an easy start to go national. So 97, I ran around in my own truck, learned all the tracks. And I did both 600 and 750 Supersport. And then in 98, I joined up with Barnett Clutches.
That's
and
right.
I brought them the Suzuki program, and that was the year I won my championship in 98. And from there, Suzuki awarded me with getting the Chaparral ride for 99. It was Chaparral's first year. Paul's father, Kel, was running the team, and I was very excited. I started off as Damon Buckmaster's teammate. But in a motocross accident that winter, he, I think, broke his neck or back, and Tom Kitt filled in for him. So that was awesome because, I watched Tom Kitt race for years, and to be a teammate with him was pretty cool. And, the season started off really well for me. I had some really good 600 and 750 races, wins, and top 5 finishes. And then I basically got Lyme disease probably around June. It was right before Road Atlanta that year. And that pretty much was the demise of my season. So pretty much took me out for the year. And, with that, I lost my Suzuki ride going into the next year. They didn't really feel that I would rebound well from it. So I understood that. So I did a privateer Yamaha program, got my health somewhat back, and that was in 2000. And in 2001, I teamed up with Jason Pridmore, and we brought Richard Stamboli at Attack, the Suzuki program. And that's what started his Suzuki. I don't know. I think he was with them 4 or 5 years with a lot of top riders, and but I was just never the same, and pretty much, just decided I was fooling myself and everyone else that was behind me, trying to be a top runner. So I just I called it quits that year. So
Wow, I I didn't realize that that's the Lyme disease. That's what caused that. I wasn't sure. I remember when you raced that Yamaha, I actually thought you had pretty good results, and I didn't know that was your kind of a after this whole thing. So, can you trace it back to a certain incident that
yeah,
caused it? I mean, it's caused by ticks, obviously, or I assume it is. Go tell us about that.
yeah. I know exactly when I got it. I didn't know that I got it, but I know when I got it. We were home. I was living in California with Jason Pridmore, and I came home for a couple weeks here in New York to train and just spend some time with the family before road Atlanta. And I was mountain biking in the woods, and I remember just throwing up.
Mm.
And I was in pretty good shape back then, and it was odd. It was extremely odd. And I I I don't know what it was about. So I left for Road Atlanta the next day. And back then we had a guy that trained Jason and I, and he was massaging me, and he's like, well, what's this like bullseye mark on your lower back? And at the time, I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was maybe a spider bite. And throughout the weekend, it turned into 2, 3 rings, and I still hadn't connected it to Lyme disease. So I raced that weekend, and it was a really bizarre weekend mentally. I was way off, and still really didn't think much about it. I wasn't feeling pain or anything. So we went back to back to Road America that year. And I remember the first day at Road America, he's working on me. He's like, Rich, man, you got like 7 rings across your whole back. And I was really starting to feel sick. So I actually pulled out of the event that weekend and flew home to go to the doctors. And I still didn't realize it was Lyme disease, and I should have. But I got off the plane and I showed my dad the rings on my back. He's like, "Oh, you got Lyme disease."
Oh my God.
So I was like, "Oh man, that's right about the bullseyes and stuff." So we went right to a Lyme specialist and started treatment. So that
Wow.
was the start of it.
So just Richie, I mean, I grew up in New York. We take them off my dog here in Ohio
Yeah.
sometimes, even after they've been embedded for a little bit. I remember distinctly when I was a little kid having a tick on the base of my neck when we were going camping, and I was kind of didn't know what it was. My parents looked at it, and my dad was like, "Oh man, you got a tick." And I remember he took it off with a cigarette. I remember he actually, but
Oh,
but
that's not a Lyme tick.
okay, so tell us that, because certain ticks carry the disease. They carry it, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
so it actually starts with the mice, and the
Okay.
mice run in fields where deer lay, and then the deer then become the carrier. The difference is it's not like an animal tick or a regular tick that you see, and it doesn't live above the skin.
Oh.
So a Lyme tick is almost the size of a pencil dot or a poppy seed, and it embeds in you. So it looks like a freckle.
Oh, wow.
So Lyme disease ticks are very hard to spot. Here in the Northeast, normally a lot of times, we'll do full body scans after doing something in the woods or out in fields. Um, Mine was in my lower back, and I just couldn't see it. And so it's a little misleading what people think of when they say, "Oh, it's a tick." It's different than a normal tick that you pull off your dog or
Okay.
all the ticks that were a Brainerd when the guys were in the signal area, my techs were coming back with ticks all over them.
Yep.
It's not that type of tick.
Okay.
And that's why it goes highly undetected. Some people don't know they even have it sometimes for months. And everyone is affected differently. Like my father and mother have had it numerous times. Even Corey's had it 2 times. Um, but it because can become a neurological disease at some stage, especially, well, depending on how your body takes it. Some people never have anything other than sore joints, a muscle ache type thing, and amoxicillin usually kills it off.
Hmm.
For me, what happened was a couple of things. One, I got right on treatment, but I tried training through it. And I found out later the treatments I was on, I wasn't even supposed to be outside, let alone in sun and hot. And, I tried coming back at Loudon for my home race, and it was like 98, 100 degrees. Humidity was brutal. And I remember I passed out after the race. I don't even know how I got into the pit. Uh, Finished top 5, which was amazing because I don't remember seeing the track too well. But I had to get rushed to the hospital and put in an ice bath. And that was really where they realized how I was being affected by it. And so they started me on a intravenous treatment where I was going to the hospital every day for a couple of months. My body just was fighting it and not healing. So that's what pretty much ended my season. I couldn't ride after that, until it really, the medication really got through to me. But I definitely have had lots of lingering effects. But
Well, it affects you to this day, is what I understand, right? I mean, do you still have to take any medications for that?
uh, yeah, the problem with Lyme disease, doctors have a hard time accepting the long lasting effects. I've had, since 1999, I've had numerous doctors. And it really wasn't until lately some of my specialists really have acknowledged my issues being related. It's the doctor getting in and medical science proves this and whatever. I mean, it's neurological and so forth. So there's all kinds of causes, but my latest specialist has definitely diagnosed all of my history and he's confident that it's a lingering Lyme result. So yeah, I do monthly treatments. I do a little bit of home care treatments and stuff like that, but I'm doing all right.
Wow. It's incredible. And I mean, it's unbelievable that you won a championship and you were probably at the peak of your career. And then it's tragic that this happened. And I mean, even when you went to Chaparral, you were feeling the effects at that point. And it's just a shame that it ended things the way you did as a rider. But I mean, you've been in the paddock ever since then and had such involvement in so many ways with the series and what you're doing now that it's incredible how you've continued to do what you're doing.
Yeah, I was pretty honest with myself, saying that I wasn't able to run as a top rider, and um, I didn't want to leave the industry. My family's owned a motorcycle dealership since 1966, so I came home and worked in it, but obviously missed it. And I was very close with Jason Pridmore. I lived a lot with him the 3 years that I did race. And, I started helping him with his stuff with Attack. And, I stayed in it. And then being with Jason in 2004, when he had some troubles with his team, the No Limit team, um, we both had become friendly with Michael Jordan that year, doing a lot of cool stuff. And Michael had asked Jason and I to use our Suzuki contacts to try to build him a team for 2015. So it brought me back pretty full time into the sport. on a totally different level. But I was psyched to be back in it and at that level, being one of the managers on that team and helping build that structure for Michael. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. And I remember that it began kind of, well, with Michael, but certainly with his friend Montez Stewart, and kind of went from there, right? I mean, how did you guys, was it because of your Ducati, being a Ducati dealer? Was that the connection for Michael with you, or was it different?
Oh, no, it's kind of a funny story. I don't know how much I should say.
Okay, well, tell us some of it anyway.
Well, okay. So we're sitting in Daytona, the beginning of 2004, and Jason and I were sitting outside of the garage. I wanted to be down there for Jason for Daytona. And the next thing you know, we see this big monster tractor trailer pull in with a black tractor trailer with a white Jumpman. And, I had heard that Michael Jordan had come into the sport with Montez that year. And I was, thought it was great for the sport. So I say to Jason, I said, Jay, what do you think about, Michael Jordan coming into the sport? And he's like, oh man, it's awesome and everything. And I said, well, are you excited to meet him? Or he goes, yeah, I'm excited, but I'll wait till he comes and meets me. And I'm like, I'm looking at him like, dude, are you on drugs or something? Like, what do you mean Michael Jordan's gonna come meet you, Jason Pridmore? Like what? And he's like, yeah. He goes, seriously, Michael's gonna come and wanna meet me. And I was like, man, you've lost it. You're over the edge here. And I said, explain yourself. And he said, well, Rich, I'm a scratch golfer, and Michael's a golfer, and Michael likes to have fun with golfing. They place bets and all that fun stuff. And he goes, he's going to want to play golf with me. And I was like, you're so high on yourself, dude. Like, this is just over the top. And that was like what, March of 2004, Daytona. And the season's going on, and we got to Sears Point, which I want to say that year was probably late May. And we're sitting in the lounge of the trailer, and door knocks. Someone's on the outside knocking on the door, and I'm like, I'll get it. I go down, open the door, and it's this guy, and he introduces himself. He goes, hi, I'm James Casme. I represent Michael Jordan, and Michael wants to play golf with Jason Pridmore. I slammed the door. I just shut the door, and Jason's looking at me laughing. I opened the door and I said, I'm sorry, man. There's a story behind this. He was laughing. Anyway, that's where it started, because what Jason then says is, I'll only play golf with Michael Jordan if Michael comes to one of my schools and learns how to, ride a motorcycle safely, because we had heard that, he was out street riding and maybe had one or two get offs. And so Jason's like, hey, I really want to spend time with him on the track, and so forth. So we were heading to Road America. So Jason says to James Casme, hey, I have a star school a couple of days out there after the races. Why don't Michael come spend some time there, and then I'll go play golf with him in Chicago. So James gets back to us and says, yeah, all right, Michael's totally cool for it. So Jason says, all right, Rich, that's your job. You go work with Michael. Like, dude, really? So cool, man. It was an awesome time. Michael pulled up in Road America, and it was incredible to meet him. And he took Jason in and myself in, like, as we were like longtime friends. He was so down to earth, so respective of what we were doing. We had a phenomenal time. I'll never forget. He wanted to do a 2-up, and I look at Jason. I'm like, I'm not doing it. There's no way I'm going to be the one responsible for Michael Jordan on the back of my motorcycle. So Jason took him out at Road America, and just watching him go down the front straightaway, he was so big on the back of a GT car that I can't say how far his butt hung off the back of the motorcycle in a tuck. But anyway, and and that's where Michael invited Jason golfing. I don't golf, so I went home. And they had a great time, and it turned into a good friendship for Michael and Jason. They were doing a lot of golf, and Michael included me in a lot of things with Jason, which was really cool. We took him to Valencia for MotoGP. That was the year Nikki won the championship. So for Michael to see that and be a part of it was incredible. We got Michael to ride the Desmo Sedici race bike around Valencia. That was incredible, and that's how that all started. So at the end of the year, when he said, "Listen, what we did this year with Montez was awesome for our first year, but I really want to build a big team. I want to go and win championships." And Jason and I had deep ties with Suzuki, so we put together a proposal, went to Suzuki, and the rest was history there. And then he had asked me to be involved with James Casme, Pete Mohar, and Craig Robinson, and I think Kenny Abbott at the time. So it was pretty cool. It was a cool 10 years that we had the team.
Oh, it was unbelievable during that time period. I remember when Michael came to Mid-Ohio and I went up there. I remember I called my wife and I was like, "Hey, I just saw Michael Jordan." And I said, "He's pretty tall." I didn't realize he was as tall as he is until he walks around our paddock. And it's like, my God.
Yeah.
And he had that 916 and it looked like a Novali for the guy. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is actually Michael's short in the basketball world.
Right. Right.
Tall to us, short there. He always had Charles Oakley and some other guys always around him. I mean, he always had an entourage of cool guys. And Charles Oakley is tall.
Yeah.
Like, that dude's almost 7 foot, and he dwarfs Michael. And of course, like, I'm looking up at the sky all the time. But we definitely have some pretty funny stories there with Charles and Michael and his crew, and walking around Valencia. Yeah, good times.
So it was funny. He was a Ducati guy, and then you guys raced Suzuki's, and it was a Suzuki team. And then it's kind of interesting now that you've kind of come full circle, and now you're involved with Ducati again. I put a lot of history through that little description right there. Does the fact that you have involvement with Ducati over the years have anything to do with this connection with Rahal Ducati Moto and how you were, and well, Corey as well, obviously, in the off season when we found out he was part of it?
Yeah, not really.
Okay.
Dealership is dealership. It's actually two totally different aspects of the industry. My involvement in racing is just what my past is, and my involvement in a dealership is, obviously my family and so forth. My brother and myself run the dealership now. My dad's 86 and still rides, I don't know, 10,000 miles a year. The guy's incredible. But anyway, the thing about it is, when you're in a dealership, you're in your own world, and racing and dealerships do not collide. And the only reason mine collides is because of my past and me staying in the racing side. Ideally, that's all I want to be, but I have this business that I keep running, and I do love it, but it's business. So that's not anything to do with where I am today. Corey, obviously has his history and where he was, and he's ridden BMWs, and which we're not a BMW dealer. And the program with Rahal came about because Rahal and myself have a common customer, and the customer has become a really good friend for both of us. And he knew Corey was looking to do something this year, and I originally was going to run my own program again for 2024 for Corey. And Corey had said for the first time, "I want to ride a Ducati." So we started on the path of building our own Ducati program, and then this friend of ours said, "Hey, I'm already sponsoring the Rahal team. Why don't I bring in a little more sponsorship and put Corey on it, and that way you don't have to run your own team again." So it was a good fit, and I had gotten to know Graham dealership wise because we trade off bikes. We both like to collect bikes, old Ducatis especially. So we had started a relationship that way over the last couple of years. So I had gotten to know Graham a little bit. But it was Corey's program. I wasn't involved in the beginning, so I was just on the outside, which was kind of cool
Mhm.
to be able to take a step back. But at the same time, I'd love to be there. So anyway, that was that. But as far as Michael Jordan, yeah, Michael Jordan loved Ducatis. And I remember Pete Mohar building him some special ones at the Gemini shop. Built some to be for his height, and we built some for just coolness. And but at the time, he spoke to all the manufacturers going into 2005 and through the years, and honestly, no one ever really pulled the plug with him, and it was quite amazing. It was actually still to this day, I cannot believe how the manufacturers didn't realize what was in front of them. And it was a bit of a shame. Suzuki obviously did, but it was tricky because they had their Yoshimura team of Matt Mladen and then Ben Spies, and it was hard to compete with that. We were just kind of looked at as another support team and not so much where they should be going with Michael Jordan. And I think a lot of that was from Japan. Um, but and then we hit the recession in '08. And then, the whole industry kind of changed and our support even changed. So we had looked at Ducati again, we had looked at Yamaha, and at that time with the recession, really just manufacturers were backing off from racing. So it was a bit unfortunate. And I really think that's what wound up ending our racing program come 2014 is more or less the manufacturers weren't doing anything for the teams. And it got harder and harder to pull support. And Michael felt that he did what he needed in the sport, and he basically said, "All right, it's time."
Hmm.
But he would have loved to have been on Ducatis. It just there wasn't anything there for him from Ducati, so we stuck with Suzuki.
So going into this year, obviously you didn't have the plans to be as involved as you are at this point. Now the team Rahal Ducati Moto had a really rough Daytona, which is understandable. I mean, first time team, big race, blah blah blah, early in the season.
Yeah.
They had a bad Daytona, and then they brought you in. But was your plan wasn't to be that hands on, right?
No, I did offer in the beginning, to help with. I listen. Ben Spies is an incredible racer, and he took this role on, and I think it was handed to him a little. I don't think he was ready for it.
Right.
Learned a lot, and he's come a long way in understanding what's involved with racing and putting together a team. So those first few months, I think a lot of things, maybe he didn't quite understand the importance of XYZ. And he does now. I mean, he's really learned a lot, and it's awesome to be in this with him. And I'm learning a lot from him. I think he's incredible with our riders. Um, it's funny, I've worked with a lot of riders and been around a lot of rider coaches. And him having the MotoGP experience and World Superbike champion and multi-time AMA champion Superbike, he sees things differently than riders do here. And it's really impressive to hear his comments and what he says to the riders. It's almost a different perspective. So anyway, but going into the season, the tractor trailer that they use for the team, my involvement was with that in the beginning because we leased them our rig. And they seemed to be pretty set with what their plans were on putting the team together. So I just, said, all right, cool. Corey's pretty well set. He's got a good program. And I pretty much figured I would be taking the year off, which was okay.
Mm.
It's been a long 30 plus years being in a paddock. So.
Well,
Well,
if you think about it, Ben's probably like, Ben and Nicky are probably like the last guys that the current generation goes back to. So
Absolutely.
his timing was good, because maybe in a couple more years they wouldn't even know who Ben Spies is.
I know, it's crazy. It's there's only a few of us left from that era, and mine was a little bit before theirs, but it's amazing how many people still come up to Ben, fans.
Right.
Got a really good following, and it's pretty cool. And I'm like, hey Ben, someone needs your autograph. All right, it's
Right.
I mean, he's just as popular as the current riders, which is really cool to see. I would say it's with the older generation of fans, not the newer generation, but hopefully it's brought in maybe the younger generation to say, oh, who is this guy? Who is this character?
Right.
But I think it's great having him in the sport and in MotoAmerica pits. I think he brings a different light than we've had for quite a few years, just because of his history. His ended too early as well, with his shoulder injury. So that was a shame, because I think he, had a lot left in him. But yeah, so it's been quite interesting how it's all turned out.
Now, Graham and the team, the Rahals, the whole family there, I mean, they have to be pretty thrilled with the results. You've got 3 riders, one of them second in the championship, one of them's 5th, and one of them 6th. And, a few points out of having 3 guys in the top 5. I say guys, but, Kayla's not obviously a guy. So, but I think we'll call her that for now. But yeah, I mean, that's an incredible start for a first year team.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a great group of guys. When I was brought in, that was one of my focuses, was to put together the right crew. And like, I've been around this a long time, so I just, I know how important that is. You can have great bikes, great riders, but if you don't have the crew behind it, it doesn't give you what you need overall. And I know PJ quite a bit. He's a fellow New Yorker, pretty close to us. I know how important for him mentally it is to have the right crew. And I hadn't gotten to know Kayla yet. I sat in on Corey's podcast with her last year and actually learned a lot about her, and was quite amazed at how incredible she was. I think at the time, maybe just turning 16, and how well she spoke. And so I started studying her racecraft after that podcast, and could not believe how good her racecraft is. Anyway, that's another story. But the focus of the team, obviously, besides getting the bikes to where I wanted them technically, was to make sure I had the right crew. Obviously, we had Brittany Stewart, who was really the director of the team, and she's like one of Graham's right-hand people, and she does a phenomenal job. I mean, she comes from the indie world. So she really knew what was needed within the team outside of technical and crew. And that took a huge load off of me. All I had to do was focus on finding the crew and technically building the bikes to be where I wanted them. But I only had 5 weeks to do it. So, yeah, it was a thrash.
It's really complimentary though, Richie. I mean, the thing about Ben that I never realized, and you would know this from being a racer, there are some racers that can't really explain what they do, and they can't really tell another racer or rider what they do. Ben, I didn't know if he could, because for all the years that he raced, he was so quiet and didn't say much. But then in talking to him through, after he got out of MotoGP, he would talk about these riders, Kayla or Garrett Gerloff or Cameron Bobier. And I was like, man, he really does understand these riders and what they have to do. And now I see him, I call him kind of a rider whisperer now. And I'm not saying that you're not that, Richie, but you compliment him, right? Because like you said, he has got that rider thing down so well. You've got the structure of the team and understanding how it works. It really is a great setup for your team. I love it. It's fantastic.
I agree with you. And honestly, I'm not the rider that can tell you what I was doing. So I'll be honest with that. I can work with the slower guys and help them come along to be something, but I'm not. I don't have that eye like Jason Pridmore does.
Yes,
it's probably the best I've ever seen. And Ben has really impressed me. Like I said, I'm blown away with what he brings to this team. Knowledge is to work with these riders. So I think it's great, especially for Kayla. PJ and Corey have been around so long, doing their own thing. And Corey's actually another one that's really good at coaching and seeing things, and he's helping Kayla also, and PJ, I think, at times. But Kayla, now has in front of her Ben Spies in her ear. The engineering that we have with Steve Weir, looking at data and the crew we have. I mean, she's got probably one of the best scenarios a rider could have in the paddock. And if you see her progress throughout the year, it's been amazing, and it's been step by step, where it's what we expected for her. She's hard on herself. She's a very determined rider at her age. So, where we were super excited at each event in the beginning, she was beating herself up. But I think, now she's at the point where she knows where she is, and we've had some really good response there. And of course, PJ, we always knew, would be a front runner. He was hired by Rahal to win the championship. And, we're close. A few incidences have happened, but that's racing, and that's part of it. But I think he showed at Laguna with the double win, and convincingly, how he did the wins. I think the hunger shows. So, and then with Corey, obviously, Corey's in an interesting position because talent-wise, and I'm not just being his uncle, I think he's always been an underestimated rider. And unfortunately, with his height, this motorcycle is becoming very difficult to set up for him. It's just it's a motorcycle that just does not have room. So we're in a constant battle to get him to be able to shift and feel comfortable. So, but yeah, all three riders are doing great, and I guess I couldn't have been in a better situation to come in to have three riders able to be on the podium at any time. It made my task easier. I just had to make sure to give them the crew and the bike. So,
yeah, Richie, I got a crazy question for you, which I know you're not going to be able to answer, and Corey can't either, and I don't know, maybe even doctors can't. But why is Corey Alexander so tall?
I don't know. I'm 6 foot, and I was the tallest rider of the era.
Yeah.
Other than Aaron Yates, we were both 6 foot. He was a little thicker than me though at the time.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, I don't know where 6'4" came from. Nobody in my family's that tall. Nobody on his mother's side is that tall. And I remember when I got him into the Red Bull rookies, he was one of the youngest riders. He was 13, and never even really rode a race bike until the tryouts. And that year, from 13 to just about 14, his growth spurt, they were building him a new suit every 2 rounds. And I'm like, what's going on here? And by the time the end of that Red Bull season, I was like, who is this kid? He was the tallest kid on the team at 14. And so we knew we were in trouble with the height, but we don't know where it came from. Just that odd chromosome.
Hmm.
And it's strange because, you know, you got Jake Lewis, you got, you know, Nolan Lampkin. We've got a lot of tall kids. I mean, I tend to think maybe it's the GMOs somewhat in the milk or whatever, you know, some of that stuff, maybe heredity. I'm not sure. You're right. You were tall, but you think about back in the day when people thought Dale Quarterly was too big to race a superbike, let alone win a race on one. And you see him now and he's like an average size guy. So
Yeah.
it's, and kind of you are too a little
Yeah.
bit, but you know, Richie, I want to tell the fans something, especially the younger fans. So when you won in 1998, 750 Supersport, I want if any of you guys can go on Google and look this up and try to find the top 10 that year that Richie won, you're gonna be blown away by who was on that list. Below Richie Alexander as the champion was Jason Pridmore, Nicky Hayden, Ben Spies. They were all in that top 10. It's incredible, Richie, who you beat that year. I know they were younger. I know you're going to be modest about it, but there's a huge who's who in that group of riders that you won. That's a pretty big accomplishment for you.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely a great accomplishment. It was a different time. You know, racing back then was quite different than it is today. But you know, the other thing that those years that like I was happy about is, you know, I had a handful of really good 600 races. And that field is where you look at and go, oh my God, like we had, I would want to say back then, 17 to 20 factory 600 riders, paid salaried riders. And to finish, you know, anywhere around the top 10, to me, I was a privateer and doing a lot of my own wrenching, building my own motors. Uh, you know, that's the accomplishment that I'm really happy about. Winning the championship was incredible, but to run around the top 10 at times in super sport with all those factory riders is really, in the back of my mind, my biggest accomplishment. You know, today people don't quite understand when you say you had 2,600 super sport riders that were factory riders who also raced superbike, because back then we rode 2 classes a weekend. You know, so and the factories were making the superbike riders ride 600. So it was a stacked field. So that was a really cool accomplishment. The 750 Supersport class was kind of that oddball class. You know, it's kind of like the 1,000 Superstock. You know, it got overlooked at many times, but it still developed some really good riders. If we looked at the history of who won the championships for many years, it was all top riders, which was so to fit in there is pretty cool. You know, it went to 1,000 super stock from 750 super sport. And same thing with that class. You know, it was a little overlooked, but if you look at the champions every year, you had a John Hopkins, you had a Ben Spies, you know, you had Aaron Yates, he were championshiped on our Jordan bike. It just, you know, so yeah, it's I'm happy with it. I carry my #1 plate next to it, so I'm pretty stoked about
Should
that.
wear it on a necklace.
Like Flava Flav.
Yeah.
So
Well, if you look close though, there's quite a bit difference in years.
A little bit, yeah, a little bit.
So you've been around long enough to obviously know this, or at least have an opinion on it. But
Yeah.
one of the biggest changes, obviously, is the amount of data that the riders have at their fingertips.
Yeah.
Do you think it's making better riders? Do you think guys spend too much time looking at the data and less time just riding the motorcycle? What's your feeling on that?
Well, funny you asked that, and the reason why it's funny is because this is kind of a common discussion every weekend I have with Ben Spies. So where the sport's developed because of what the class is now, with having data allowed, with the current electronics we have on a super sport bike, you're forced to have that engineer mentality guy looking at the data with the rider. And Ben, who's had obviously MotoGP, he's had engineers, he probably had 5-6 engineers at a time around him with the Japanese, you know, engineers and so forth. he understands the value of that. But he also was a 600 Supersport champion. And every weekend he's like, why are you guys changing the forks again? Like, it's a Supersport bike. We should just be, we know a bike that works at this track. We should just carry it on for this track and this track and this. And I agree with him, because that was the same when I raced. It's not like we changed the valving all the time, or it's not, but we didn't have data back then. So our bikes could have been better back then, but we didn't have the data. Well, now that we have the data, we got to look at it. So yeah, when the bike's in a ballpark of working, you tend to leave it as close as you can.
Mm-hmm.
But our engineer loves to look deep. And, he gets into all these forces and all these things that blow me away. I'm not an engineer, so yeah, he's trying to optimize everything to give the rider the most. And the problem is in Supersport, there are the class is pretty stacked this year. And I think that's where the denominator is, okay, say it's the top 7 riders. Other than Matthew and PJ, who we know pretty much are going to be first and second every weekend, every race, there's still 7 riders can fight for the podium. And I think that's one of the differences is, most of these riders all have competent people looking at their data and helping them get a better motorcycle. And if you don't, you're hurting yourself. And I think that's just where the difference we are right now. As far as we keep going faster every weekend, we're breaking track records and race pace is faster than the previous year. So I think that's a huge part of it. And it's interesting to see where MotoAmerica has gone with this new class for next year. With the Kramer, I had a talk with Teague about it, because I was trying to understand it. And, one of my questions was to Teague, like, hey, you're introducing this junior class, young kids, fathers who are been wrenching on real basic motorcycles, and now you're giving them a fully adjustable chassis with electronics that isn't the easiest to work around. I said, you're going to hurt the class. You're going to hurt these kids, for not physically, but it's
with
going to
their
be
development.
Yeah. And he said, well, no, actually, the problem is our paddock has a shortage of those technically capable people to understand kind of where we are in racing. One of my biggest problems when I started the involvement in the team was finding somebody to help us engineering wise. There just is such a shortage of it. And it's because we're kind of where the sport went, right? When we started losing all the manufacturer support, all the big factory teams, people left and went and got real jobs. Interesting, when I went all the way back to 1998 and looked at every Superbike championship and looked at every team to look for crew of who ran those teams, who was engineers, who were techs. Because, not to say today's people aren't good, but I needed something special. And everyone's retired, or, it's obviously they'd be old like me, but it's just tougher and tougher these days to find the right crew for where we are technically in both super sport and superbike. It's just a very, very small field. So Teague's take on it was, hey, we need to start just like the young riders, we need to start bringing people up from a younger age and learning technically how to tune these bikes. And I thought about it, I was like, well, he's right. Interesting, and it's going to help these kids go right into super sport, I feel, because the change of where super sport's even going next year. So anyway, I better understood where his mind was in this new class and so forth. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, that's tricky. That's what Ben kind of echoed too. And I understood that. I didn't ask him about this when we had him on, but that adjustability to me is a little bit scary because you take the fact that you've got a more GP style frame that's a lot stiffer, but at the same time, to your point, there's a lot of adjustments on this. I don't know that it is a parent or a family with their kid. I wonder if these teams have to have somebody on there, or for sure that parent, whether it's the mother or the father or somebody, sure had better get to understand motorcycle chassis dynamics pretty quickly, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for
Yeah,
sure. I mean,
Yeah.
you're trying to develop a young kid who probably doesn't have the knowledge of what they're looking for, so that and say the father who doesn't understand what triple clamp adjustments do on a bike and so forth. So I think the first year definitely will be interesting, and I think second year, I think you'll see a better understanding and hopefully have some development of technicians and that next step, because our sport needs it, for sure.
that's interesting. That's interesting to know because I always say too, you take a lot of the technicians in our paddock or the team managers, you for instance, there are a lot of riders, a lot of guys who are former riders in our paddock that are still pretty darn fast, that are or were, or the older I get, the faster I was, however you want to put that.
Yeah.
But it's cool how there's a lot of that sort of biblical, like handing down or begetting to other generations, how that happens. And you look around and it's a who's who for sure to see you guys out there. I just love the fact that it still kind of continues to be that way. And I even project forward, Corey or some of these other riders, they're at some point going to still stay in the paddock. And now I'm really projecting down the road a little ways. One thing I want to ask you, and I know we haven't got a lot of time here, Paul, we're running out a little bit. So this is a big question for you, Richie, but the 955 V2 is bigger than the 916 Superbike was in displacement. Let's face it. So it kind of is a Superbike if you think back to those days, but it's now a Supersport next generation. There's 750s in there. And I'm wondering with what we hear about the industry, maybe not with the BMW, with the leader bikes, you keep hearing that maybe leader bikes are going to go by the wayside. Do you think that Supersport next generation, that ilk of riding of class, is going to become Superbike at some point down the road?
I think that really depends on World Superbike more than
Okay, yeah, right.
anything, right? They tend to dictate. And it's interesting to see where these manufacturers are going. With the R9 Yamaha, and knowing what's coming from Ducati, and knowing what my customer base is like. It's so weird. We really don't sell thousands anymore. We really don't even sell 600s. I sell a lot of Ninja 500s. I mean, I can't even. It's amazing how many I sold this year. Um, Other than the Ducati side, I'm talking more on the Japanese side.
Yes, yes.
Because Ducati's a different thing in itself. But yeah, it's interesting. I can't put a finger on it, and I don't speak to the people that would tell me that. I'm not involved in those conversations. Ben and I, we were talking about that at Laguna because we hear rumblings, we hear things about World Superbike because they're owned by Dorna, and with MotoGP going down to an 800 or that category, and World Superbike times getting closer and closer to MotoGP, that they maybe are going to dummy down the bikes there. So how much of that's true, I don't know. So obviously we just follow suit to what happens at that level because the manufacturers obviously are involved with that. So it'll be interesting to see where the next couple of years go. I think I know what Teague's plans are with the class, and I think it's heading towards the path of closer to Superbike. So we'll see what comes out for the rules for next year. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. So we'll definitely see. And yeah, I agree with you. I think there'll be a handful of riders as they age out, coming into sport as a different level. I know, Corey's run race teams with me since he was a kid, so I know that's something he wants to do, be involved with running of a team. So I'm sure there's a handful of older guys that we'll see doing some involvement in the sport for sure.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, we probably left a lot on the table here, Paul. We're just going to have to have Richie back because, I mean, we touched on a little bit what he's doing. I mean, Rahal Ducati Moto is doing great, obviously. And I mean, I think there's an upside to it. One little point I want to make real quick. Richie, you said there's a little bit of a separation. You're a dealer and you're a team manager. I'm not going to reveal any of this, but you told me some stuff from the manufacturer side that does relate. Your understanding as a seller of street motorcycles does sort of give you a little bit of insight into what might be coming into the race paddock. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. But it's also because I'm that side of the dealership that wants to know.
Yeah, true.
Listen, dealerships have so many sides to it. And we're in a niche sport. Okay, so we're a dealership that focuses on super bikes and sport bikes. And you walk around my dealership and there's all paraphernalia, and I got all the Jordan body work around, and Corey's history and a little bit of my history. And we're a family dealership and we do track days, and people come into our dealership because of our racing history. And Corey's fan base is huge because of what he does. And differently than when I raced, we didn't even have it. We didn't have computers really. So we had speed vision, which was awesome. But, so different times. But there's a lot of dealerships that don't know anything about sport bikes and super bike racing, right? So they're maybe a motocross shop or an ATV shop or whatever. And you go into a lot of these dealerships and their staff are clueless, really. But they don't need to, because they need to focus on the business and selling motorcycles to make money. Where we kind of go a different path because of the passion the dealership has. But yeah, for sure. I mean, maybe because of my contacts, I've only been in the retail side of this business my whole life. So I have a lot of deep contacts, and then obviously that crosses over to some extent racing wise. But it's really because I want to know. I want to know where, not just I want to know for racing, but I want to know where to build my customer direction. So yeah.
Yeah.
We're the oldest Suzuki and oldest Kawasaki dealer in the country.
Yes. I wanted to point that out. I'm glad you did. And I thought it was Kawasaki only. I didn't know it was also Suzuki. That's incredible.
Going with the original owner, not, there's some dealerships that maybe a year older or whatever, but they're third owner or second owner.
Oh yeah, your original. Hey, do you believe, does win on Sunday win on Sunday, sell on Monday work for your dealership?
My dealership, yes.
Okay.
Because we focus on it.
Yes.
But if the dealership isn't into sport bikes and paying attention, which most aren't, and also I think Ducati dealerships, yes, especially because it's such the Ducatista, the whole family, the branding, that's all race derivative. So I think for Ducati dealers, yes. For your Japanese brand dealers, no.
Okay. Well, we're glad you're a performance shop for sure, because we love the connection and the carryover. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Love it.
keeps me going. Retail's tough, it's probably wouldn't be my first forte if I had an opportunity to pick, but it's good that it's a family business. It's nice, when we have Corey here, and Corey's got a younger brother who is starting to learn the office stuff with my brother, who runs the sales department. So it's cool when my father's here and having all the generations. So
it's so cool.
He comes in like the mayor. So
that's funny.
That's so good. I love it.
We just like to have other old guys in the paddock.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, Paul, you and I, we've been around this.
We've been way too long. I don't think there's any quit in us.
No, no. We're sucked in.
Yeah, we are.
Right.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll obviously see you in a couple of weeks here in Mid Ohio. I guess that'd be the team's home race.
Yeah, Graham has a shop in Cleveland. So we're actually doing a rider meet up there one night before the
Yeah, I
race
saw
starts.
that.
So yeah, that would be a home track for him. Definitely very excited. We got a pretty cool livery coming on something, so
Wow.
keep our eyes out for something pretty cool.
Good.
But yeah, it's our home event, and then there's a Ducati Revs event on Monday, which the riders will all be part of. And I think Graham is making it to that event. I know he's got a crazy schedule with IndyCar racing. He got to Brainerd finally, and I think Mid Ohio is a goal for him. So it'll be exciting. It's good to have him there because I think he learned a lot at Brainerd. Because it's really his first event. He showed up in Daytona, but it was there in the beginning before it even started and had to go to an Indy race. So he left there, I think, with a different perspective of what we had to do to get the team up and running. And I was glad for that. So I'm excited for Mid Ohio.
Perfect.
Yeah, we are too.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay.
Richie.
Thank you,
guys. Thank you.
All right.